Hello viewers, good morning. I'm Ron Grant coming to you live and direct from Tortola, Roadtown Tortola that is, and you're watching 284 Media. Veteran spokesman Dean the Sportsman Greenaway recently took to social media to share his thoughts on what he calls the lack of support for sports and athletes in the British Virgin Islands from politicians and ex-athletes. Now, as a territory of the Virgin Islands continues to be well represented regionally and internationally by our local talented athletes, it is imperative that we as a community find ways in which we can support and strengthen sports in the BVI and give it the due support needed. Joining me this morning to continue the conversation is veteran sportsman Dean the Sportsman Greenaway. It's a conversation you don't want to miss. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. You're watching 284 Media.
The win.
What are the hell
I'm freaking out.
is about these people?
It's always a pleasure coming to you live and direct from the...
What's poppin'? What's really good?
Davis has won it for the Lakers.
Viewers, welcome back. Thanks for sticking with us. The one and only Dean the Sportsman Greenaway. Welcome back to 284 Media. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Now, you made some very interesting observations recently via a social media post, which garnered much attention from the Virgin Islands public, as well as regional and international sources. Tell us about a little bit about the background and observations. You said it sometime between 2000 and 2021. Tell us about that.
Well, let me start first by saying I have been covering sports in the BVI since 1986. I'm just, about 5 months shy of 36 years of covering sports.
Wow.
And I come from the background, not just as a journalist, but I'm an administrator. I've studied sport administration. I've done stuff in sport administration. So I put a list of my thoughts together, and this hasn't been just now. It's things that I've been observing over the years. It has come to a point that I skip opening ceremonies because I'm going to hear a lot of the same premises regurgitated, and who has time for that?
Absolutely.
Let me focus on the athletes playing. And I decided earlier this year that I'm going to write something and put it out and see what the public says about it, because we have in place politicians who are ex-athletes, and what I look is what they have done for the assistance and development of sports over the last 36 years. So I try to give a background of how the sports were formed,
Of course.
when people got elected, and people who have been involved in different sports, from being presidents of associations, from being players and in key positions, but nothing has been done for sport. So to me, collectively, everybody looked to politicians for advice, for leadership, for things in sports. But sports has been treated from the perspective, and when I say not just sports, youth activities have been treated more of a recreation something. You look at we don't have a national stadium in the BVI. You hear we have recreation grounds.
Yes.
We have this whatever. But we don't have that national pride, a national stadium. We don't have minimum standards for facilities. You just throw down a court in a community.
Yes.
There isn't a bathroom. There isn't shelter. There isn't seating. There isn't basic amenities. And most of these things just cater to guys. So there isn't any development involving women.
Understood.
So what you are finding is, the guys go out and recreate and the women stay at home. So what is the vision for sports? So I'm trying to now generate that conversation where we can look at sport seriously.
Absolutely.
And as a journalist, if I don't do it, nobody gonna do it, because as I mentioned at the top of the show, I'm coming from an administrative background.
Understood. Now, in your comments, you mentioned that with the exception of cricket and softball associations formed in 1948 and 1952, respectively, 6 other sporting associations, the athletics, tennis, sailing, basketball, football, and volleyball associations, were formed between 1970 and 1979. What is needed to support these various associations representing various sports in the Virgin Islands?
Well, first of all, we need to have a vision. We need the support. I've asked the Premier when he was elected, and I asked him again during a game he played in 2020 about getting sports as a line item in the national budget. Nobody can tell you how much it costs to administer sport in the territory. We need to be able to have associations put a budget in place to show their various development plans. And that goes into the officials, and you're able to have part of that included in the national budget. There are countries that do this in our region of the Americas. They dedicate 4 to 6% of their national budget to sports. Now, it isn't saying government is funding sports 100%. You have treasurers in sporting associations, so they would have their finance committee and do their finance activities to generate sports. I am throwing out a random figure. Say government provides 65% of the funding. The association must come up with the 35% of the funding, but they must come up with their 35 first to show that they are actually doing. You can see from them their plan for youth development, both male and female,
yes,
for junior development, for under 23 and national teams. We don't currently have that structure in place.
Right.
One other thing I'd like to mention, from the school level, we've only had one sport with a championship since 1957 in schools, that's track and field.
Okay.
We have had semblance of other sports trying to have championship, but it's nothing consistent, nothing sustained. That need to change. Furthermore, we need to be able, as I said, nothing has going to be done unless women are equally distributed. And let me just segue to one point that's crucial to make. In track and field, for example, men carried the sport from 1970 through 2004. Women took off in 2005, and men have made a recent resurgence. So it shows you that if women are given the right opportunity, the right environment, what can happen not only in track and field, but in all other sports. We have opportunities for our athletes to gain athletic scholarships, to further their education and better themselves. And sports is the vehicle to do that. We have a lot of delinquency within the country. Studies have shown if you engage young people in activities, they won't have time to engage in a lot of the stuff that is going on right now. Now, what we are saying, I mean, the donkey doesn't get out the gate, so we got to try reeling back in.
Understood. And one of the most important ways, just like you said, of keeping the youth of a territory
Yes.
Together and gainfully engaged is through sports. I have to touch on the fact that sports is not a part of the national budget in the BVI. What say you about that?
No, repeat what you said. I didn't hear that.
I have to mention the fact that sports is not a part of the national budget in the BVI. What say you to that?
Well, the thing is, I think it was when I was the president of the Athletics Association, we went to the Bahamas. I think it was in 2013 where we had won a bunch of medals. We won the most medals that we have won. And one of the things I noticed that Bahamas does for their junior teams, the government support the junior team. They had an act of parliament that they fund them to go to these international competitions. I brought back the suggestion here to the previous government. You know, everybody look at me as, oh, well, how you could get up and suggest these kind of things, because ideas only come from certain quarters. But what I have been exposed to I am looking at certain standards where we should be. We are a country that have a bunch of money. And that money has gone everywhere except into the development of our youth and our people. That got to change. We can't sit down here and just elect politicians and let them feed us all this stuff and their actions is different to what they are saying. You can't tell me over these years, all of these people, I think we have between 20 and 30 persons since 1967 who were involved with sports, some of them as president. And not one has said, well, Lord, let me see if we can get a little 5 cents in there to help sports. You know, to me, that kind of thinking, you're not thinking about the development of the youth. And the question I really want to ask leaders, where does youth play in the scheme of things in national development?
Wow.
Because if it is not reflected in your budget, then it's not important. The important things get reflected in the budget. So I hope that when they finally address sports, it is rushed through the House like they rush through things that are important to them.
Understood. You spoke a lot about the support of the politicians, but I want to touch on the importance of the support and the lack of support that you said you've seen as it pertains to ex-athletes as well.
No. It's not ex-athletes. It's ex-athletes who have become politicians.
Understood.
Not ex-athletes.
In general.
No,
okay.
no. The focus was on elected politicians who were former athletes.
Okay.
No. This isn't anything about ex-athletes, because there are a lot of ex-athletes who are working with young people in different sports. So I'm looking at the perspective that we look to politicians, since we don't have a sports council yet, or whatever you want to call it, an agency that directs sports, that generates the ideas. Because what a lot of people don't often recognize is every association we have in this country is affiliated to a regional or international body. If BVI is going to participate in something, the invitation does not come to the government. It comes to the association, and it is hoped that the government support the initiative. We have had instances where associations wanted to do things, and it has not happened. Let me give this example. I've heard a lot since 1995, and this is the other topic I'm going to address, sports tourism. Now, what is sports tourism? Sports tourism basically is organizing an activity in your country and getting heads in beds. People coming in and spending their money here. We have spent millions of dollars over the years sending people everywhere. So the BVI has to look at what part of the sports tourism market best suits it. We have to look at what infrastructure we have, and then you deal with the associations about getting them involved with hosting whatever the regional championships are. 3 things that I saw from my experience that can help us, that where people travel with them. I know people will say, well, a basketball tournament, but how many people, we have hosted the CBC basketball tournament, I think it's twice, but how many people came in with those? The North American Optimist Challenge Championships, that's sailing. The Sailing Federation in 2013, or before 2013, wanted to host that event. You are talking about between 250 and 300 sailors coming in and their parents. And most under 20 events like those, parents travel with their kids. And even the Optimist North American Championships, it has people from Europe and South America, because the North American region has some of the best competitors. So they want to come and compete. Antigua has hosted the stuff twice since the BVI, it was rejected when the BVI torn it down. We had the same thing with the idea of hosting Little League baseball. That was torn down. When I was president of athletics, we wanted to have a conversation exploring the possibilities, the feasibility, and how we would host the Carifta Games, the 2015 Carifta Games. That was torn down. The Carifta Games, people come from all over, and there are many people who would love to come to the BVI. So you are talking the kind of money that comes in. If you notice the BVI Spring Regatta, which dumps up to $2 million,
Yes,
probably more during the week. But the BVI Spring Regatta, I just did an interview with the director. They have people that start coming into the event is in the end of March to the first week in April. But they have people coming into the BVI from in January, setting up boats. Some people come in and test the waters and stuff. So money start coming into the economy from in January, and the event isn't until March and April. So you have to let the organizations be able to lead the charge in doing this. It is never going to be a government initiative, because unless the government supports it, it always has to get the association involved to formally put a bid and whatever together. And in these kind of things, there is so much you learn that can help you to do other things. And one of the things I tend to find that we believe that because somebody was a good sportsman or sportswoman, they know about sports. If you only study administration, you don't know nothing about sports. You end up with pegs and square holes.
Wow.
Because what happened? If Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson were because they were good players, they would have been the best coaches. What the Bulls or whatever team and the Lakers would have been like. So that's just an example of people being good sportsmen, but not administrators, not coaches. Yes. You have to study the aspects, because there's one thing to play on the field, but there's another thing to execute. And I call it a pie. You got to have a plan. You have to have an implementation strategy, and you must be able to evaluate.
Understood.
Okay? Now, if you ask any sport in the BVI for their plan, a copy of their plan, and their quarterly plan, ask them when you get a chance. Let's see what you get. Because many people don't plan by quarter as part of its overall plan. And these are things that have to do. So hosting events, being in things with events would help to improve all of this and build the capacity within the country. And
wonderful. It
comes with government support.
I totally agree, and I thank you so much for your knowledge and your expertise and sharing. Now, viewers, of course, to see the entire story that was published on our page by Mr. Dean Greenaway, you can do that by visiting 284media.com, as well as our Facebook page. His observations did not come without giving some well-needed suggestions as well for our sports to flourish, a basic framework, of course, that includes, he says, the following elements, just a few: the inclusion of sports as a line item in the national budget. A vision for sports must be developed, and there must be drivers of that vision without political interference. A minimum standard at every level of sports must be established, and of course associations must develop budgets, which we spoke about, with their respective developmental programs for male and female at all levels. Dean, I must commend you on making sure that you have included, which you have, the female aspect, because as mentioned, too often our females get sidelined and ignored. So we want to make sure that when we're looking at the issue of sports, we definitely tackle inclusion. I thank you so much for your time this morning. Do have a good rest of the day and continue to fight the good fight.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. Sports is my life, and I'm never going to stop, and I'm going to express myself whether people like it or not, because it's all about doing better. What I hope this does is bring people in the room who understand what is happening, because there's more knowledge at the bottom than at the top. The politicians have other things to focus on. Let us who are interested in sports not just like sports, but have a deep interest and understanding, be able to put things in place to help better our young British Virgin Islands sportsmen and women.
Beautiful viewers, that's all the time we have, but that, of course, is not all the content. Stay locked to our page for local, regional, and international news and updates. We thank you so much for your time. I'll see you later. I'm Ron Grant.